What's up, gamers? Welcome back to another rockin' video, and I have a simple question for you. Have you ever written a simple music piece on the piano, thought to yourself, you know, this would sound good if played by an entire orchestra, then proceeded to throw what you have into various instruments hoping to get that classy, dynamic orchestral sound, only for it to sound like this? Well, fear no longer, my brethren, for I've spent days alone contemplating within the confines of my music theory chamber to bring you these 5 simple steps to properly transform your terrible piano piece into a work of art that rivals those of Apollo himself. So let's get started. So the real key to all these steps is simply dynamicy. The orchestra can be really complex, so for it to sound good, you gotta use that complexity as much as possible. This is my example piece. I've remade Romantic Flight by the fabulous John Powell. I would have written an original piece, but I'm trying to get this video out rather soon, so this is the piano arrangement I have for it. Now I know that may have been actually impossible to play, but that doesn't matter. Now this is the orchestral. So this is how I got there. Step 1 is orchestration. It is basically knowing what instruments play what parts in order to make it sound good. So the piccolo takes, since it's a very high instrument, it's very audible to the listener. It starts out here with the introduction, just to sort of get the attention, but then it drops off here as it enters the first statement, and then comes back as it enters the second one, so that way it adds a bit more power before the big final drop. And since all that energy is already built up, it doesn't even bother about continuing on with some of that. We also see with the French horns taking periodic breaks throughout the piece, going sometimes pretty high or other times really low, and just taking random breaks, even if it's not for any purpose, still makes somewhat of a colorful orchestration as you go through. This way it's not playing the same piece, the same instruments every single time, so it adds a little bit of interestingness whenever something new joins in. So the real key to orchestration is making it as dynamic as possible while also keeping it balanced. Balancing the volume, balancing the general pitch, but of course using the different instruments is what makes it very interesting. Step 2, simple highs and lows. Now I wish I made an original piece to, greater emphasize this, but there are still some pieces of that in here. First thing is the piccolo, very obvious kind of the way it's doing this here. You'll notice that's the piccolo, very high instrument, so it's playing something very simple, playing the melody, but it's also only doing it very periodically, and even if it is doing the melody, it's never doing anything too complex, and if it was to do something complex, it'd be very quiet. It wouldn't be too noticeable. But by keeping the highs and the lows simple, those are sort of supposed to be like emphasizers. Meanwhile, everything in the middle is kind of what you hear to fill up the atmosphere. So the middle can be a good right mess filled with everything. If you look at it right here, you can see the middle is very complex with things like this being played by the second violins, and I'm pretty sure clarinets played at other points, doing random little things like this. Meanwhile, on the very high ends, you can see it's very melody-based. And you can see on the low ends, they're very simplistic, not going too crazy, and that's necessary because if they are going too crazy, the listener is going to hear that, and they're not going to be able to hear anything else. Step number 3, details to improve. Very good example of this is the harp. These are very sort of simple things to coordinate. Just have a harp run up the scale whenever something big is about to happen, so that way whenever there's the start of something big, something new, something interesting, having these small little details come in can really add a lot to its specialty. So you can see with the harp, as well as the violins right here as well, slowly ascending, doing some glissando-like stuff, just so that it raises all the way up here to the top so it can just sort of gently ride its way down, therefore giving a nice rush of energy with this first stroke of the melody right here. It can also be found a lot in the percussion. The percussion is a lot easier to sort of pull off these sort of things. So right here, as you can see, I just have a cymbal which is sort of slowly rolling in, and then a final hit right here being played just at these small little parts where something new is starting. Putting these sorts of miscellaneous details on parts that you really want to stand out will most definitely make it more audible, make it a whole lot more impactful, and just will make it a whole lot better. Step 4 is details to improve. Now, whenever you're making a piece, you're going to come across a good amount of silences, because it can't be too crazy all the time, or else it wouldn't sound right. So sometimes you gotta take a little break with some of the main stuff, but in order to keep up that same energy, you gotta fill it up with something else. So here is a little example of that with the first. We'll start right here. The melody is being played by the first violins, but then the second violins come in right here, where this little absence is right here, where it just goes on without any sort of anything interesting happening in the melody. You can hear them very slightly in the background, and they add just a nice little touch, nice little detail to the parts where it is rather quiet. And this can not just be done on the high ends, but also on the low ends. So this same little spot where it sort of, goes a little bit soft, the basses do this little thing in pizzicato, which makes it a whole lot more pronounced than the typical sustain legato that they're doing right there. But having those small little details in the absences fill it up, but also don't completely take away from whatever sort of melody you're trying to do. But it should just be somewhat noticeable, and it should not blend in too much with the massive clutter of the interior of the song. And step number 5 is articulations. Now, I couldn't get too many articulation changes in this because it's, rather simplistic, nothing too crazy is happening. But wherever you see a color change, aside from the typical green, that's some sort of change in articulation in order to make whatever is being played sound a little bit more interesting. You can see it mostly down. It's mostly done here on the strings. The blue done right here in pretty much the violins and the violas are just a little bit more pronounced versions of the typical legato of whatever's. But perhaps the best example of it can be found in the basses with the pizzicato, as mentioned earlier. Just that simple change in how it's being played will make it sound a whole lot warmer, a whole lot more complex. Just add a little bit more spice to it to make it a little bit more interesting. The use of varying articulations will make your piece stand out and be noticeable. Everyone's heard the typical sort of, whatever notes, like if we listen to the bass just alone right here. Everyone's heard just the typical standard legato or whatever, but then you make it play the pizzicato. It sounds just a little bit more interesting, and will make your piece not sound completely boring once you've done all the orchestration for it. Put in some varying levels of the articulations into more than just the strings. It can be done on the others as well, but I just wasn't really feeling like doing that for this video. I'll probably make a better version of this video in like 6 months, so wow, this is really not that good of a video. Anyway, those were 5 simple steps to perhaps help you in your, music creation adventures. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully this wasn't a complete waste as I think it is, but alas. I hope you enjoyed this video. The content probably wasn't that interesting, but hopefully it wasn't painfully long. You know what, since you made it to the end of this video, I have a special gift for you. If you leave a like on this video, then you will have the opportunity to receive 5 whole minutes in the Music Theory Chamber. 5 whole minutes to be on the border of life and death. And you know what? If you subscribe, you can live there. No joke, no scam at all. Oh yeah, I want to thank you all very much for watching this video, and hopefully I can get some better quality videos out rather soon that I can actually plan and prepare for instead of just rambling off without a script. So yeah, hopefully we can do that next time, and I'll see you later. Goodbye, my brethren.